Paris woke on the morning of January 21st, 1793, wrapped in a bitter winter cold that seemed to breathe along the empty streets. The Seine carried a thin mist, and the bells that once announced royal ceremonies were silent, as if even the city hesitated to speak. Inside the walls of the Temple prison, Louis XVI, King of France, sat at a rough wooden table, a table unworthy of the palaces he had known, yet now the center of his shrinking world. He had slept little. The sound of distant drums reached him before dawn, and with each beat he understood that the day had finally arrived. The day when a crown would offer no protection, and a name would mean nothing. During those slow early hours, the king met the priest Henry Essex Edgeworth, the man chosen to accompany his soul, where his guards would accompany only his body. Louis listened to the Mass with a calm that surprised even himself, answering prayers in a steady voice, while his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. He asked for simple bread and a little wine, the kind of meal shared by ordinary men, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine Versailles, the laughter of his children, the voice of Marie Antoinette calling him from another room. He wrote a final letter, carefully shaping words of forgiveness, insisting that he held no hatred for France. The pen moved across the paper like a last loyal servant, and when he finished, he folded the pages with the precision of someone arranging his own heart. The guards entered just after 9, their faces hard, their boots loud on the stone floor. They addressed him not as Majesty, but as Citizen Louis Capet, and that single phrase cut deeper than any blade. He requested a few minutes to embrace his family, but the request was denied. The Revolution had no time for tenderness. As he dressed in a plain gray coat, he looked at a small ring he still wore, a gift from earlier, brighter years, and he whispered that a man can lose everything except the duty to die with dignity. Outside, the crowd was already gathering around the scaffold at the Place de la Révolution, a restless ocean of witnesses waiting to see whether a king would bleed like them. The carriage ride through Paris felt endless, moving between lines of soldiers and spectators who stared in a mixture of fear and triumph. Drums thundered to drown any royal words, and the wheels creaked like the bones of the old regime. Louis watched the houses slide past, noticing details he had never seen as king: cracked windows, hungry faces, old men holding the hands of their grandsons. Some shouted insults, others removed their hats in secret respect. Edgeworth remained beside him, murmuring prayers while the king's breathing grew heavier. The air smelled of wet wood and iron, and the tall shape of the guillotine soon appeared ahead, rising from the mist like a dark, patient animal. At the scaffold, the executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, approached, asking the king to remove his coat and tie his hands. Louis resisted for a brief, proud second, saying that he had never been bound before, but the executioner answered gently that all men are equal here. The ropes touched royal wrists, and the crowd surged closer. Louis stepped onto the platform and tried to speak. He declared that he died innocent, and hoped his blood would not fall back on France. The soldiers shouted, the drums exploded, and his voice was swallowed by the republic he had once ruled. He looked up at the cloudy sky, perhaps searching for the face of God, perhaps searching only for courage. The moment came at 10:22 a.m. The mechanism was checked, the crowd held its breath, and the blade fell with a clean metallic flash. In less than a heartbeat, The head of Louis XVI dropped into the waiting basket, and a roar burst from thousands of throats. Long live the Republic! Some laughed, some cried, some simply stood frozen, realizing that they had witnessed not only the death of a man, but the execution of centuries. Edgeworth, pale and shaken, leaned toward the lifeless body and whispered the words that history would keep. "Son of St. Louis, ascend to heaven." The executioner lifted the severed head to show the people, and the mist over the Seine seemed suddenly thinner. France changed in that single second. The crowd slowly dispersed, carrying home stories they would tell for the rest of their long lives. Stories repeated in kitchens, in villages, on ships far at sea. The ring, the letter, the gray coat. All were taken away as evidence that even kings are temporary guests of time. Paris grew quiet again, but it was a different quiet, the quiet after thunder. The old world had ended, and a new, uncertain chapter began, written with emotions as sharp and complex as the Revolution itself. And somewhere beyond the scaffold, beyond the shouting soldiers and the winter sky, a question remained hanging over France. If a king can be executed, what part of us is truly safe from history?